Welcome to TecHype, a show where we debunk misunderstandings around emerging technologies, debate the real benefits and risks, and explore technical and policy strategies that will allow us to harness emerging technologies for good. I'm your host, Brandie Nonnecke. In this episode, we're on location in Las Vegas, attending the EDUCAUSE conference, where we're talking about AI, friend or foe, to higher education. In this episode, we sit down with two experts, one individual from UC San Diego, who gives us insight into how the university is harnessing this emerging technology to benefit its campus, and another, a senior researcher from EDUCAUSE, who recently led a research report looking at the benefits and risks of AI in higher education and how faculty, staff, and students really feel about it.
I'm Vince Kellen, CIO here at UC San Diego. I've been at UC San Diego about just under 8 years now.
Okay. And today we learned a lot about the work that you're leading at UC San Diego to support the development and implementation of AI. Can you tell us more about the work that you're doing on campus?
Yes, we've been, like many universities, moving very quickly, trying to uncover what the real opportunity here is. The difference is we're trying to do this entirely on-premise, entirely open source or nearly, and very focused in sort of two dimensions. One, administratively, how can we do administrative jobs faster, better, to give people their life back, basically administrators. And then the second piece is to help in instruction with mainly a focus on teaching advisors, teaching assistants and advisors, helping students. I think that will turn in time to direct classroom material content development. We got one pilot at least going in that domain.
Great. And then to make sure that we're all on the same page here, it sounds to me like you're talking mostly about generative AI tools and their use on campus.
Yes, most of what we're talking about here is generative AI. The university has a long history of all sorts of AI work.
Exactly. The supercomputer,
yes,
UC San Diego. I'd love to hear how the supercomputer is coming into play on especially development of generative AI and other forms of AI across the university system.
Yep, we have a university, San Diego Supercomputer Center, SDSC as we call it. They've been doing AI work both for the NSF, for UC San Diego, and UC faculty who are using the facility, and doing AI work for at least a decade. So they've been doing a lot of model development, machine learning, etc. We got involved in my area of CIO land in that 7 years ago, we created a machine learning cluster of essentially kind of a museum of GPU parts, but in the structure and architecture of what the Supercomputer Center runs. And we enabled students to apply AI and machine learning in their coursework, and it got used in all sorts of courses across the curriculum. And then that helped us jumpstart everything we're doing internally on AI because we already had all the infrastructure and all the know-how.
Right. Now, the White House, and they issued their executive order on AI, which was signed by President Biden on October 30th. It actually facilitated the pilot of something called the National AI Research Resource. The White House executive order on AI outlines 8 priority actions seeking to promote innovation and competition. We'll see a launch of a pilot of the National AI Research Resource to expand access to grants, computing resources, and data. Additionally, the order seeks to provide small businesses and entrepreneurs access to technical assistance and resources. And I would love to hear about how UC San Diego, how are they actually working with the entities involved in the National AI Research Resource? I know that we just started the pilot, but we need congressional authority through the Create AI Act to be able to actually allocate the billions of dollars. I'd love to hear from you. Is this actually going to come to fruition, or is it just a dream?
Well, I hope it comes to fruition. It might be just a dream. We'll have to see what happens next. We're engaged in the pilot on this. I'm co-PI in an entity called Cloud Bank coming out of the NSF. So we're helping on the cloud side of the AI on the NAIR pilot. I think, though, it's still not enough. I think the world is investing in this new future of AI. I call AI the new oil. So it's like oil was in the late 1800s. So every country around the planet is thinking about it. Countries that have lots of cash assets will be investing probably multiples of what we're investing in AI.
I have a follow-up question for this. Now, do you think that the NAIR, you mentioned it might not actually achieve its objectives. Do you think that most researchers will actually just turn to the private sector, as we have done with Amazon Web Services in the past, and just, partner with OpenAI and others?
I don't think that will happen because of the cost difference. It's just way too expensive. And one of the first things the pilot is doing is investing in the Texas Tax Center for AI bandwidth or more AI infrastructure. And same thing in our supercomputer center. So I think we're going to still see a heavy amount of on-premise AI.
No, it's too expensive for them to, contract with OpenAI to develop another,
if you're going to use and Cloud Bank, we learned this quickly, researchers will use the cloud, no question, but they're going to use it for shorter runs, development runs, and then they will take it to somewhere that's bigger and cheaper for much larger deployment or much larger stuff.
That is fascinating to me. So they're doing this first run to just validate whether or not it actually works, and then when they want to scale, brilliant.
Yeah, or if it's just a short run and they can't get space in a national lab for what they're doing, and the budget is small enough.
It's fascinating. So being involved in the National AI Research Resource, this model sounds like it would be very helpful for kind of validating some projects. Do you know if there's a process that's going to be in place, kind of vetting the research projects that should be prioritized to be implemented through the NAIR? Will they be required to do some pre-testing?
Absolutely. That's being worked out. Over at Cloud Bank, we've been doing that for the last 4 years. We've been pre-validating the requests that come in for use of cloud to make sure that they're suitably using the cloud and the research program looks sound. I think that there is much more to do. We cannot rely on industry for this. Industry has some very high bars of profit to make and some very high bars of protection about what they do to make. And this is such an embryonic area. It demands research.
Okay, now what about open source models like Llama?
Yeah, we're using Llama 2 as an open source model. We're also using one of the BERT classifiers, or BERTA. We're looking at Mixtral. We've been experimenting with that. We're looking at Code Llama. I think this is going to be a very interesting battle here between what we call open models, or I call it small AI now, and big AI like OpenAI, Google, and to an extent Microsoft.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question. Do you think that there's any possibility that there could be an intervention by Congress to require the private sector to provide at a fair and reasonable rate access for public purposes? Okay, why not?
It's capitalism 101. And right now, Congress is not
favorable to not being.
No, and by the way, even if they did, they'd miss the mark on the legislation, and it would probably have so many adverse effects that the good effect never gets realized or gets overwhelmed by the adverse effects. I'd much rather see investment by the federal government in continuing to facilitate open models and open research. This is not. If you think about it, the team at OpenAI almost got bought out by Microsoft in mass, and Microsoft wouldn't miss a beat. So it's not necessarily hundreds of thousands of employees. Small teams of a dozen researchers can make serious headway in a lot of these models.
Right, and actually we're battling a debate right now in the European Union about this open versus closed and risk mitigation. One of the concerns about open models is that a nefarious actor could potentially identify the model weights of that model, sort of reverse engineer it, take off those safeguards, and then now you might have a model that's going to be performing spuriously, having some harmful effects. How can we have these open models with appropriate protections in place?
Yeah, the protections I think are going to be, it's going to be hard to do it as a preventative fashion, but as a punitive fashion or a law enforcement action. I think that's the way to go at it. It's not unlike cybersecurity. By the way, there's nothing to stop a closed AI in a corporate sector from doing very hidden, obscure, but malevolent things just like that, right? And so we've got to hit this from the enforcement. I like the open because when it happens, many will detect it and many will be able to validate quickly. So what we've learned
could be the benefit of these.
What we've learned in cybersecurity, the more you make this open, the more that multiple people can validate, challenge. You get black hats and white hats going at it hard, and it just accelerates the discovery process.
Right. That's amazing. We should explain to all of our viewers, because we debunk misunderstandings around emerging technology. What are black hat hackers versus white hat hackers?
Well, white hat hackers are good people who are trying to hack things in order to do good. The black hats are trying to figure out how to make money, profit, or otherwise do harm. And when you have open tools, it tends to reveal all of that activity far faster, and you uncover holes in things quicker. So I think to deal with threat in AI, it's better to be as transparent and as open as you can with virtually everything, so that multiple eyes can vet, inspect, and see. It's noisier, it's a little bit rambunctious, it's probably harder to make straight line progress, but at the end of the day, it will be a safer place for it.
Wow, well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a fascinating discussion. Just really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's great.
Great. It was really great to meet you today. And I was so impressed with the work that you're leading to look at, how do we harness this transformative technology of generative AI within academia, within higher education. You released a report fairly recently, covering the research and findings. Could you please tell us more about the report and some of the most important insights that you think people should know about?
Sure. So the report was just released a couple of days ago. So let's say that would be February 12th, if I can do math correctly. And it's an AI landscape study. And specifically, this is the landscape of AI in higher ed. And we collected the data in November and December of last year. So the intention was really to capture that sort of 2023 explosion, and then kind of see at that point in the year, dust was sort of starting to settle. To a point, it wasn't quite as uncertain what's going on. And so it was a great time to sort of take the pulse with maybe, hopefully, the intention of doing similar follow-up studies sort of longitudinally. So we looked at a few main areas. We looked at strategic planning. We looked at...
Now, strategic planning for the use of AI?
Well, maybe use. I think I'm cautious usually about saying using or implementing or integrating, because some institutions are banning or not using AI, right? So I think it's just about what is the impact of this explosion of technology on the way institutions are just approaching their strategies and so forth. So it's kind of nuanced.
So first, strategic planning.
And then we looked at policy, impacts on policy, and then...
Now, impacts on policy within higher ed?
Yes, and this is only higher ed institutions. Okay. So to be included in the study, you had to be currently working at a higher education institution. Okay. Policy, and then impacts on the higher ed workforce. And then impressions of respondents about the future of AI in higher ed. And so that's where we get into some of those topics around what do you think are appropriate uses? What do you think are inappropriate uses? And to your point before, I certainly had some respondents who said, I don't think AI should be used at all in higher ed. And I think this is a really good place to pause and say, definitely people are conflating AI, generative AI. Yes. And so we kind of look at the data with that lens of, even though we started up front asking respondents, please consider the broader umbrella. Yes. We know that probably most people just sort of, they're engaged in generative AI. Right?
Yes. Now, when we started this discussion, you said some universities are just banning the use outright. What are some of their main concerns?
I think I would say the biggest concerns are what is appropriate use in the academy? So I think a lot of people kind of value higher ed as this place of original thought and creativity and creation of new knowledge. So the data from the survey don't get super deep into that, since it's such a broad landscape survey, but sort of combined with just talking to the community and kind of knowing what people's concerns are, I can say definitely people are concerned about the human element, losing people's ability for critical thinking and creativity and that sort of thing. And it's just not the appropriate place for it.
Now, was there anybody else among the respondents who took the other side?
Yeah, definitely.
I'd love to hear their perspective. and how do we get both of them to talk to each other?
Yeah, I agree completely. No, there were definitely some that were very enthusiastic. Some folks, I shared today at the conference a quote from somebody who said, AI is for everybody. We're all on board with trying to use AI. There's definitely a big focus on preparing students for the workforce, preparing students to be engaged citizens in a digital society. So I think when the enthusiasm comes out, it's often connected to those areas. these students are graduating and joining careers where they need to know how to use these tools appropriately. So the folks on the other side who want to ban that technology, maybe they're not considering that we need to prepare our students to be appropriate users or ethical users of AI.
Okay, and in 2 to 5 years, where do you think we're going to stand on this? Are we going to have that curriculum that is necessary, or are we going to turn away a bit from generative AI? Might there be a new technological machine learning marvel that enters in that then we're going to be looking at that?
So I like to talk about the future in the framework of strategic foresight research approach, which, if you're not familiar, this is a research approach that comes out of University of Hawaii. And it's a way to kind of look at data today to make not predictions, but sort of these projections of potential futures. So whenever someone asks me about the future, I'll usually give you like 3 or 4 answers because I think, no one can predict the future, but we can see kind of potential corners of that future universe. Where might things go? So I don't think we're headed in a direction of everyone banning the AI technologies, and we can say specifically generative AI because I think that's the biggest concern about banning or not banning. I think that the institutions that have been trying to do that are probably going to have to go back on that a bit because, Microsoft Office or, all of the tools that you're using on a daily basis, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, exactly. Those tools are now incorporating generative AI directly into them.
Exactly. So, I do think that it's going to become essentially impossible to ban any generative AI technologies. I hope that our community in higher ed will become more informed about the broad umbrella of AI, something that you talk about a lot, which is that AI is not just generative AI. There's all these other uses. And let's face it, if we did try to ban AI, we'd basically cripple our research productivity in higher ed, right?
Yeah.
I think I hope that we see more sort of understanding, more education around this. This does have to start with faculty and staff and then sort of trickle down to the students. But we also have to keep our eye on the fact that these students are graduating now and they need help now. So balance.
Exactly. And what do you think can be the most positively transformative implementation of AI in higher ed? So kind of thinking, I love this little pockets of foresight. What do you see on the horizon?
Yes, if I had to pick what could be the most impactful and the most transformative, that's really tough. I always try to think about how a new technology could improve equitable outcomes of education. So if I went with like my dream world of in 2 years from now, what do I really wish could happen? I would say that I hope we can figure out how to leverage some of these technologies to broaden access to education. Maybe that's through just in time or like real time feedback for students, real time engaging with maybe like really great tutoring chatbots or, whatever that may be. But I sort of in that world of broadening access, supporting equitable outcomes.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and letting us know. Now, where can our audience members find your report?
Our audience members can find the report on EDUCAUSE website. So actually, if you just Google EDUCAUSE AI landscape study, you will find that. Or my name. We had that conversation about having a really unique name is great for people to find your work. So you can find that too.
Yes, Jenay Robert.
Robert, last name is spelled like Robert. I always say the best thing that happened for me to explain my name to people was Steve Colbert being famous. So it's still just like Steve Colbert. Yeah. But Robert.
I love that so much. Yeah. Thank you really for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's always a joy to hear you speak, and I really appreciate your work.
Oh,
thank you.
And I yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In this episode of TecHype, we learned about how higher education institutions are thinking about the use of AI and putting in place appropriate oversight. If you want to check out our other episodes, please go to techhype.org. Emerging technologies are changing your life. Your ability to understand these technologies will enable you to thrive in an ever-evolving digital world. TecHype is a series that ventures beyond the buzz to reveal the true capabilities of emerging technologies. We cut through the hype to debunk misunderstandings, provide insights into the real benefits and risks, and identify technical and policy strategies to harness emerging technologies for good. Our show features experts who break down the technical aspects of emerging technologies, from AI to quantum computing, and the policies and governance strategies to harness them for good. In our first season of TecHype, we demystify the complex world of artificial intelligence, from social media recommender systems and the trust and safety teams that rein them in, to the rise of generative AI and strategies to mitigate the spread of malicious deepfakes. Our first season features leading technologists, world-renowned researchers, groundbreaking innovators, and tech policy pioneers from academia, civil society, industry, and government. UC Berkeley professor Stuart Russell, one of Time's 100 most influential people in AI, explains the true capabilities of artificial intelligence and how it can be responsibly used to better our lives.
You are the expert. What is artificial intelligence?
So I think everyone understands it's about making machines behave intelligently. And that dream actually goes back thousands of years. You can even find Aristotle talking about fully automated musical instruments that play themselves and things like that.
OpenAI, the tech juggernaut behind ChatGPT, is in chaos. On Friday, November 17th, OpenAI's board announced it had voted to remove its visionary CEO, Sam Altman. While formed to support the open and responsible development of AI, OpenAI's move toward closed proprietary development has left many concerned about whether it's appropriately identifying and mitigating risks. This move lays bare a growing rift in the AI development space, whether to speed up AI development or to tap the brakes to ensure AI safety. We sat down with Mike Isaac, award-winning New York Times journalist and author of Super Pumped, The Battle for Uber, now a Netflix series, guides us through the raging debate on AI development in Silicon Valley.
So, have you seen anything in the venture capital space of sort of an awakening among them that, hey, maybe we should think more about the types of companies we're investing in?
I love that question, particularly because I thought it would happen after crypto popped, right? The crypto bubble. I'm pretty bearish on crypto. I'm not sure about you or your listeners and viewers, but I'm pretty skeptical. I think that it was largely driven by a bunch of hype cycles.
Alex Winter, director, writer, and actor, known for his role as Bill in the Bill and Ted franchise, explains to us the role that AI is playing in the entertainment industry and its central role in the Writers and Actors Guild strikes of 2023.
YouTube has enormous power, and that includes power for good. It's a vast platform that does many, many, many things. And I think that's probably the first misunderstanding, is just what YouTube is. I think there are two core misunderstandings there before you even get into the broader one. Maybe that falls under general. But I think that one of the reasons that YouTube is left out of a lot of the conversations around the influence of these tech platforms on the public is because people don't really know what it does. People will think it's a social media platform, which it really isn't. Or they'll think it's just about cat videos or influencers, which it's not just that.
Those were the good old days, Alex, when it was just cat videos.
For about 5 seconds in 2005. What we're really talking about is the largest media platform on the planet by far in terms of the interaction of the public with a tech platform. There are more people watching YouTube than anything else, movies, TV, anything. It's the number 2 most searched web platform on the planet after Google, which is number 1. Both of these are owned by Google. So you have one giant tech monopoly that is controlling most of the web traffic and certainly controlling most of the eyeballs on the planet.
Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, shares his experience building the trust and safety program at one of the world's largest social media platforms.
If you look at any of the big problems that social media has to wrestle with, from nation-state disinformation to abuse and harassment, all of those problems are easier to solve when you approach them as community and collective security problems. If you look back at the history of social media and the history of these technologies, so much of it has been about the community co-constructing the platform with Twitter.
Joan Donovan, renowned disinformation expert and author of Meme Wars, the untold story of the online battles of pending democracy in America, guides us through the evolving nature of disinformation and extremism online.
When it comes to meme wars and the use of humor and satire and transgression in convincing a public to vote for a certain candidate or to just divest from the political world entirely, I think we're in for a doozy when it comes to the the technological innovations that have happened around AI and deepfakes and ChatGPT or other large language models. I think that we're going to see a lot more disinformation. I think that elections are going to be more fraught because people will be having conversations with chatbots that they think are people.
Right, exactly.
And those can be easily manipulated and loaded up with all kinds of lies. And we might never discover that until it's too late.